to each of you at today's valuable workshop. This session is proudly held in collaboration between our faculty and the Technological University of Dublin, focusing on the vital theme of entrepreneurship for persons with disabilities. This topic holds significant importance for us as we are deeply committed to promoting inclusion and actively involving people with disabilities in all aspects of our community. We are truly honored that this session will be led by Professor Thomas Cooney from Technological University Dublin. Professor Cooney is a professor of entrepreneurship and the director of the Center of Entrepreneurial Behavior, Inclusion and Innovation at TU Dublin. As a leader international authority on inclusive entrepreneurship, his work is dedicated to expanding entrepreneurial opportunities for the most underrepresented in society, a mission embodied in his specialized courses focusing on entrepreneurship for people with disabilities, marginalized youth, and refugees. His global influence is demonstrated through prestigious affiliations, such as his role as an Erskine Fellow at the University of Canterbury in New Zealand and his position as an honorary president of the Fayang Entrepreneurship Research in China, and former adjunct visiting professorship in Finland and Mexico. Furthermore, his expertise is highly sought after by policymakers worldwide, serving as an advisor to governments um, the European Commission and the OECD and the European Training Foundation. He's a member of the OECD EU Youth Entrepreneurship Policy Academy and a grand jury member of the European Enterprise Promotion Award. His distinguished contributions have been recognized with numerous honors, including being named a Wildford L. White Fellow, an entry comp champion and fellow of the European Council for Small Business, and an honorary life member of the Small Enterprise Association of Austria and New Zealand. Professor Thomas, again, I want to welcome you for this workshop, and I want to thank you for participating today and volunteering to give us this workshop. We're very eager to learn and to listen to what you are giving us.
Shannon, thank you so much for your very kind words and lovely introduction. And thank you so much for the invitation to be here. I'm delighted to have the opportunity to speak to colleagues from the faculty and indeed the wider university, because I know from our conversations that the invitation was open to people beyond the university itself. So to all who are able to join us, you're most welcome, and I'm delighted to be here this evening. So thank you. Here we go. So my name is Tom Cooney, and the topic of conversation tonight is entrepreneurship for persons with disabilities. That's not the one I wanted. I'm just going to stop sharing that because it's the PowerPoint version that I'm going to look for. And yeah, there we go. So I specialize in the area of inclusive entrepreneurship, and as was mentioned, I work with a variety of marginalized and disadvantaged communities where we support them to maximize their economic and social potential. You know, it's our belief that given the right support, that people from different communities can build an entrepreneurial future and can not only contribute to society, but also live fulfilling lives in the way that anybody else might. Where this came from originally was that there's a failure by policymakers and by enterprise support agencies and by governments to recognize that people from marginalized and disadvantaged communities have additional and distinctive challenges that the mainstream population don't face. And if you talk to policymakers, what you will frequently hear is they're saying to you, oh, look, we treat everyone the same. You know, our doors open to everyone. And one of the key points I want to make tonight is that treating everyone the same is not the solution. And our door being open to everyone only works if people know the door exists and they can access it. So people from these different backgrounds, and even what's really interesting is that the additional and distinctive challenges faced by, you know, a person with a disability is quite different to someone who is, you know, an immigrant, which is quite different to someone who's a marginalized youth, which is quite different to someone, you know, who's, you know, who was in prison and is now out, you know, back home and looking for a job. So, you know, it's not that they have the same additional and distinctive challenges. Each community has their own unique characteristics and unique challenges that, and therefore customized and tailored programs are needed to support these communities. This just gives you some idea of the work that I've done in kind of recent years. The Missing Entrepreneurs Report is an excellent report every 2 years from the OECD. If you're interested at all in inclusive entrepreneurship or entrepreneurship for marginalized and disadvantaged communities, I would highly recommend that report. It's every 2 years. There was a later one in 2023 indeed. The Pathway to Entrepreneurship for People with Disabilities in Ireland is one of a couple of policy reports that I've written here in Ireland. The Palgrave Handbook of Minority Entrepreneurship is a book that I'm really proud of that came out in 2021, which looked at entrepreneurship across different marginalized communities, and then supporting people from marginalized communities into employment was a report that I was commissioned to do. And again, now that was on employment, but it's still around the area of marginalized. So it's work that has been ongoing for many years, and it's challenging because the barriers here are so systemic that it's hard to change. I just wanted to share this model with you because I'm quite sure you're familiar with this. It's the triple helix model of universities, industry, and government working together to drive innovation, create knowledge, and foster economic development. Okay, it's the model that, you know, most universities would follow in terms of engaging with the outside world, as it's often referenced. So, and I noticed from the university, your university website, that, you know, engagement was a key activity. So the triple helix model is you know, a model that most universities would follow. But more recently, the quadruple helix model has begun to be adopted by some universities, and that extends the triple helix model by adding a fourth sphere, which is civil society or community. And that's really important, right? Because when we're engaging communities, then, you know, we're listening to the people with whom we're working. It's not policymakers, it's not businesses, you know, it's people on the ground. And in terms of people with disabilities, then that's advocacy groups, it's disability organizations, and it's people with lived experience of disability. And if we're looking to build truly inclusive entrepreneurial environments, then the voice of the community must be part of that. And, you know, we'll come to it later, but when we were building our program in Ireland, you know, it was co-created with people from the community. It wasn't, you know, Tom Cooney doing some research, you know, and, you know, working, you know, through my past experience of, you know, teaching undergrad classes and saying, okay, you know, given my experience as lecturer, here's what I think is best for, you know, this community. It was something that was co-created with the community. And indeed, as we'll see later, in the course that we're currently running, it's somebody from the community itself actually delivers the program. So this notion of the quadruple helix model is something that I believe we should embrace if we're to be truly inclusive as a university. But that's not the reality. And I'm sharing the story here of Emma, one of our students who, is explaining to me one day, it's a couple of years back now, but explaining to me that she's a wheelchair user and she arrives early to college because she's concerned that, the doors won't be open or the ramp could be blocked and she'd have to get support. And that the normal, simple, you know, action that we take of entering a building could be problematic for her, something that we don't even think about. Okay, and if it is blocked up, then she's got to text a friend or she's got to ring the security guard office to get help. Okay, and that's something she doesn't want to do because she's independent, she's a university student. Okay, and this is somebody putting barriers in her way when she just wants to attend class. And then when she gets to class, so often the professor or the lecturer isn't using universal design principles, isn't considerate of the people in the class potentially having a disability. And by the way, even though my slides show a lot of people in wheelchair, disability isn't always visible. So when we're in a classroom and we've got however, let's say 100 students in the classroom, what we know for sure is some students in there will have a disability because, on population averages, 16% of the general population, have a disability. That's a global figure. So therefore, the chances are quite high somebody in the classroom is going to have a disability and it may not be obvious. So, professors, lecturers are not using universal design principles. They're not considerate of, persons with disability, and they just rush through slides, rush through material, and somebody with disability may be struggling to keep up. But even something simple as group projects can become a challenge because, as Emma was saying to me, is, her friends are great, the groups she works with are great, but sometimes arrangements are made without really thinking about, okay, what is it that's happening, right? And let's meet at such and such a coffee shop, and we can do our project work there. And then you get to the project shop, and it turns out that the stairs or those narrow aisles or the doors not accessible, right? Or happened myself on one occasion where I invited somebody to meet me for a meeting in a coffee shop, and having considered all of those issues around entrance, around making sure there was no steps and all, when the person needed to use the bathroom, we discovered that they had to go up a number of steps up to get to the bathroom, and that was something that wasn't possible because that person was in a wheelchair. So even though she the students think that they're being inclusive, she does feel sometimes that she's an afterthought rather than a teammate. And what that is telling us is that so many of these barriers are systemic rather than being the personal limitations of the student or of the potential entrepreneur themselves. This is a number, or these are statistics that frequently surprise people when I talk about them. Because as somebody said to me once, when I think of disability, I only think about those that I see. And that's obvious here in the wheelchair. But of those 4 people in the wheelchair, 2 we know to be have a disability. But what about the other 2? Maybe the other 2 people also have a disability, but it's not instantly recognizable. There's 1.3 billion people on the planet have a disability, and that's about 16% of the world's population. What we also know is that their employment rate is only 27%, right? Compared to 56% for people without disabilities. And if you're a young person, that's somewhere between the ages of 15 and 24, okay, then it's much more likely, okay, 48% are not in employment, education, or training, what's known as NEETs, okay, whereas for somebody without a disability within that age category, then it's only 25%. So what you're seeing there, okay, are much higher rates of economic inactivity than persons without disability experience. And that then has other consequences, right? Because, you know, persons with disability are much more likely to experience multidimensional poverty and material deprivation because there's no money coming into the house or less money coming into the house. So it's not only lost economic opportunity, but it's also, you know, creating social inequality that limits their life options and community participation. What we also know is that there's a difference with regard to men and women in terms of disability rates. And for men and women, what we got is that, sorry.
If you allow me, please.
Yeah.
Are you sharing a presentation?
Yes. Are you not seeing it?
No. We don't see your presentation.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Because it says to me, it's showing to me that it's sharing. Okay. I'm so sorry.
No, it's okay.
Okay. Is it okay? I'm going to try this once more. Please, thank you for stopping me. And
okay.
no, that's not the one I want. I'm going to. Can you see that?
No, we don't see it.
Sorry, but I think it's working. Maybe the problem with you, Dr. Rafat.
Excuse me?
Yeah, I can see the sharing file. So maybe the problem with you, Dr. Rafat.
Can you see it, Shah?
Yeah, I used to see it. Now it's stopped.
Yeah. Okay. I'll go back again. Can you see it now?
Yes.
Okay. Can everyone see it?
Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
all's clear.
Oh, it's good. Okay. Yeah, so look, what the point I was about to make here is that women face a double disadvantage because disability and gender means that there's a higher prevalence of women who have a disability. It's 19% for women, it's 12% for men, right? And the employment gap is even greater for women than it is for men. So, you know, women face compounded discrimination. So it's this double disadvantage. Yeah. So basically the point I'm getting to here is that what's happening is that there's systemic disadvantages existing in most countries. And you know, these include, first of all, there's the healthcare burden. Obviously, somebody with a disability is in need of higher healthcare needs, right? But on top of that, it means that they face additional costs in terms of healthcare. So there's more doctors' bills, there's more hospital bills, there's more hospital appointments, right? There's more medical needs. So it means that they're going to have less disposable income. Now, that's going to be important later when we talk about finance for starting up your own business. Because if you haven't got a job, right, if you've got high medical expenses or higher medical expenses, okay, then that gives you less money to have in the bank. So therefore, in terms of starting up a business, you've got less money, to access. There's also educational barriers. We know that children with disabilities have lower school enrollment rates and higher dropout rates. Okay, but we also know that people with disabilities are going to finish school, at less high, secondary school or university, at less rates than people without disabilities. So the problem with that then is that they're less educated, which means that they've got more limited. They're more limited in terms of skill development, and again that affects their employment opportunities. There's also the digital divide, and again, even though people believe that the digital era makes it much more equal, it's not necessarily true, because what the research is telling us is that you know people with disabilities have less access to digital technologies and internet connectivity. Okay, so then that limits their participation in in the modern world and in the way that we meet, just like this, for example. Okay, and it also limits people in terms of online learning, which is all part of modern entrepreneurship. And then what all of that leads to is issues around stigma, discrimination, exclusion from society. And then that kind of has a knock-on effect regarding self-confidence. So basically what I'm saying is that, the whole system is starting to work against the person, and breaking through all of that is quite challenging. So here's Liam's story. He was one of the people on our course, again, a couple of years back. And Liam has a visual impairment. And this is what he's telling me. Okay. So he's got a visual impairment. He's got a degree in computer science. Started up a web design business. Okay. And he thought he would target or use his knowledge of disability as a kind of competitive advantage, and that he would certainly look to improve websites belonging to companies and organizations by making them much more accessible. But what he discovered is that even in business, the system works against you and creates barriers. So like he was saying, simple things like you go to your local enterprise support office, right? And frequently they're not accessible. They're in locations, right, that are not accessible. The application forms, okay, are usually hard copy or image-based PDFs, right? That a screen reader in his instance, in his situation, couldn't interpret, right? And then this was his experience when he asked for assistant. A staff member said to him, "Why don't you bring someone with you? Why don't you bring someone along?" Right? He went looking for money. Banks required in-person signatures, okay, on printed documents. Okay, I said here, right? One officer said, bank official said, "How can you even manage clients if you can't see them?" Right? So, like, how insulting is that? And that's not just him. A number of people have told me this, where when you mention you got a disability, the immediate suggestion is, why don't you partner up with somebody who's not disabled? So it's questioning their competence and their capability. You've also got problems in terms of networking. So, going to events, okay, can become issues because, events normally aren't considerate of, certainly business events are not considerate of, persons with disabilities. Like an aside here, but if you look at business brochures, if you look at enterprise agencies or policy documents, right, where are persons with disability visible, on those documents? where's their image, where's the photograph, you know? So if you're promoting an event, a business event, you know, where's the image of the person with the disability on that promotional material? And at these events, how often would you see somebody with a disability as the guest speaker or on the panel discussion, right? Now, again, I'll come back to, you know, you can't, you know, not all disabilities are visible. So maybe some people are on these panels, you know, and have a disability, but we don't know about it. But, you know, what effort is made by business organizations, by government agencies to ensure that role models are visible at events and in promotional materials? And then the other thing we got here is you know, because of his disability, he faced higher startup costs because he needed assistive technology, needed specialized software, right? And, you know, people don't, investors particularly, are not sympathetic, you know, to that kind of costing and to his situation. So what he found was that he couldn't get a job, so he decided to set up his own business. But again, the barriers started to appear in many different areas that he hadn't expected. And all that is doing is, you know, compounding the disadvantages that already exist. So basically what we're saying here is that there is an opportunity for entrepreneurship to be a pathway for people to have their own business, to create their own career, to be independent, right? And one of, you know, what's positive about entrepreneurship for persons with disability is that it's flexible and that it accommodates health needs. So you can dictate your own working day, and if you got hospital appointments, or if you need to take a rest after so many hours, all of that's possible when you work for yourself, right? And you can obviously control your own environment much better than if you're working for somebody else. And obviously it's also promoting SDG 4, SDG 8, and SDG 10 as part of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. But as I say, the reality is that disabled entrepreneurs are underrepresented and face structural and institutional barriers in terms of their participation. What are those barriers, right? Well, as I said earlier, access to finance is one of the biggest ones. Right? And banks and investors do not perceive entrepreneurs with disabilities as attractive business propositions. And part of the problem, as I mentioned earlier, is that they've got less capital coming into the game. Because of all the additional costs that they got, and because of the likelihood that they were not working in employment. There's also infrastructure gaps, okay, in terms of inaccessible infrastructure and digital tools, right, which excludes their participation. There's negative stereotyping that in some way a person with a disability is less capable of running a business than somebody without a disability. There's the extra costs involved, as I mentioned earlier. There's the limitations around networks. There's policy fragmentation, which is there's no coordinated support from government to help persons with disabilities start up their own business. But the biggest one of all, and this is international, this is, you know, not just Ireland or Western Europe, this is a global issue, is the welfare benefit trap. So that persons with disability, you know, who are receiving welfare support or, you know, some form of welfare benefit, that to give that up and the certainty of that money and instead start up their own business, and the uncertainty of the income that may or may not come in, it's just too big a jump. And we need to find a way of enabling people to start the business on some form of secure income for, you know, a period of time until they're, you know, generating enough money to survive by themselves. But at the moment, that jump is too great for too many people, and they're not willing to give up the certain income of welfare benefit for the uncertainty of the income that might be generated through their business. And it remains one of the biggest barriers to entrepreneurial activity by persons with disability across the world. So what makes it possible? What can be done, right? Then obviously assistive and digital technologies can make a big difference, okay? But only if people have access to it and there's internet connectivity. Incubators need to be much more inclusive. That's, you know, business incubators, and they need to define, you know, not only are their spaces more accessible, but the programs that they run have got to use universal design principles as a baseline activity. We need peer networks. We need microfinance, but also universities can support this activity by providing accessible education, mentoring, and research that strengthens their entrepreneurial capacity. And obviously policy frameworks can also make a difference. But it's my experience that if we're waiting for governments to change their policies, to change the environment, that's a very slow activity. And we're better off if we make it happen and build from the ground up rather than waiting for government to make change happen. So let me explain what we've done here in TU Dublin, something that we're really proud of. So in 2020, we delivered 5 webinars on self-employment that was targeted at, you know, people with disabilities. And each of them attracted over 100 attendees. And what that said to us was that there is certainly interest here in what we're doing. But at the end of it, I felt, okay, we ran 5 webinars, but what have we changed? What's actually, you know, what difference have we actually made? All we've done is, you know, had 5 talking shops. Now, it was a good start because it created attention and it created discussion. So in 2021, we launched a pilot program, which was designed, delivered on an online course for 20 people. And as I said earlier, it was supported by an entrepreneur with disability who brought his lived experience to the whole course design. So it wasn't Tom Cooney sitting down thinking what works best for the community. It was, as I say, co-created. And then once we had it designed, we shared it with advocacy organizations, disability advocacy organizations to get their input. And we also shared it with other people with lived experience so that we kept improving it. We ran that pilot, it was very successful. And in 2022, we secured funding from one of the big banks in Ireland for 3 years to run the program from 2022 to 2024. And the good news is in 2025, because of the success of the program, they've renewed it for another 3 years. So each year we run the program from September to December. It's for 12 weeks. It's 2 hours per week. It's online. And we have a maximum, we only allow 20 people on the program because it's very heavily resourced, as you'll see in a moment. In 2023, we look to improve the offering even more, and we went back into the content and enhanced its design and also added new materials and made it much more aligned with persons with disability based on our experiences of previous programs. Then in 2024, I was arguing that, hang on, at the moment, we only run it for 20 people and we only run it from September to December. What happens the rest of the year? And what happens to people who are not amongst those 20? And so we created an e-learning version of the course, plus a suite of training resources. And we gave them free to the National Enterprise Training, or the National Enterprise Agency in Ireland. And we also gave it to other national agencies that work with people with disabilities. And we gave them all that resources for free. And by the way, good news, particularly this is to the Dean, if you want to access these resources for yourselves, I'm happy to share them with you also. So if you were looking to develop a program, locally, and you're looking for resources to get started, I'm really happy to share the resources that we've created with you for free, and you can maybe pilot a program through your university if that's something that was of interest to you. Some of the good news is that in 2025, we have expanded into Northern Ireland. So it's now an all-island program. But we've also been running the program in Malta, and we've had Sweden, Denmark, and Spain also expressing an interest in having us run the program in those countries. We're also working with UNITAR, the United Nations Institute for Training and Research, looking at how we could put our training resources on their platform to make it globally available. And then the other thing that we're currently working on is we're looking at how AI can enhance the resources, and potentially we're looking also at translating it into other languages. So from 5 webinars in 2020, we're now in 2025 looking at international expansion on a program that's been hugely successful in Ireland. Just to give you a little bit about the course design and how we go about it. So we have an open application process. We usually get about 40 applicants per year, but as I say, it's capped at maximum of 20 places per year. And we select solely based on the business idea. So what we're looking for is applicants who have a business idea but have not yet started. What we're not looking for is somebody who's just looking to do a course for 12 weeks because they've got nothing else to do at the moment. So you're asked 2 questions, well, you're asked quite a number of questions, but the only 2 we really examine are, the one that explains the business idea, and there's a question around motivation. Why do you want to take this program? And based on those 2 questions, we identify 20 people that we think would value the program and would benefit from it, and we offer them a place on the program. As I said earlier, it's online delivery, and that's important because that means there's no issue around accessibility in terms of transport, in terms of getting to the university. It also means that a person anywhere in the country, okay, anywhere across Ireland, can participate on this program. It also means that any type of disability is possible, and that's really important. So the nature of disabilities is hugely varied. So for example, this year we have somebody, it's an online program, we got somebody who's deaf. So we've hired sign language interpreters to work with us while the program's happening. The person who's delivering the program is actually blind. And then, so we, again, we've got to work around that, but he's an entrepreneur, he's a trainer, and he's super at what he does. And having someone with that lived experience makes it so much better for the students, because they can relate to, they can relate to that person, rather than, let's say, if it was me delivering it, where I don't have a lived experience of disability, then, I might empathize, but I come from a different place. And I assure you that having someone with a disability deliver it is far more effective. We use the business model canvas framework, which covers 9 essential elements as our framework. And we use an online tool that allows people to build their business model canvas on a week-by-week basis. People also get academic recognition. They get academic credits if they do the assignments and complete the course. They also have access to the TU Dublin disability support services because they are students of TU Dublin. They're registered as students. They can also use the library and other resources like that. And then on the final day, sorry, not on the final day, sometime after the course is finished, we have a Dragon's Den or Shark Tank type event where we invite everyone to come to this pitching of their ideas to well-known business people. And also we have the presentations of certificates and a celebratory type event, which brings a fabulous finish to the course. So what makes this program distinctive? Well, first of all, it's the only customized support in Ireland for somebody with a disability who's thinking of setting up their own business. But what's really interesting is that not only is it only customized support in Ireland, but we're discovering is that there's very few customized supports available, globally, and that any research shows us that there's very, very few programs available in any country supporting that, and I mean customized. Okay, there's lots of initiatives that say, we help people, with disabilities start up their own business, but it's not truly customized. Secondly, everything we do has universal design throughout the content, throughout the delivery. The content itself is disability specific. All the examples, all the challenges, all the conversation, it all relates to disability specific content. We have guest entrepreneurs each week who are entrepreneurs with disability. And that's really important because they're role models. They serve as they show that there's a pathway to success, that it can be done. But these entrepreneurs talk also about the lows, not just the highs. All our lectures are recorded, and that means anyone that's missing can watch it back. Or if somebody didn't understand it, in real time, they can also go back to it. So our online learning platform means that it offers very flexible learning opportunities for the course participant. We also give everyone their own business mentor for one-to-one guidance. So each of the 20 participants gets their own business mentor, and that's really important. And as I said earlier, we use a business planning tool called SemVenture Validate out of the UK to enable the course participants to build their business plan on a week-by-week basis by answering a series of questions. So what's the impact? Well, out of 20 participants, usually it's 3 or 4 startups per course. And I've got to explain this because what we've told participants from the beginning is that we're not looking for 20 out of 20 startups. That's not our ambition. Our ambition is to give each participant a positive and supportive environment to examine the viability of their business idea. But if it's not viable, it's not viable. And the fact that they have a disability is irrelevant. A bad business idea is a bad business idea. So we're quite firm in terms of looking at it from a business viability perspective and not looking at it through the lens of, oh, they've got a disability, maybe we could help them. It's got to be viable, and we're quite truthful in all of that. And we finish up with 3 to 4 startups per year, but that's fine. What's really, really interesting, and we learned this by mistake originally, because what actually happened, we got some feedback that we had on a question we hadn't asked. But it turns out that in excess of 90% of the course participants each year will tell us that they now feel much more self-confident or self-empowered to go back into the labor market. So even if they're not going to start up their own business, they now feel more confident about getting a job. And that's because they've developed skill sets. It's because they've created, they got more business knowledge. But also they feel more self-confident because somebody listened to them. They feel that they've got more values, self-worth. And actually one of the 12 classes that we do is called Balancing Personal and Business Well-Being, because we think that building the person is as important as building the business. And then the other thing I've said is we're always oversubscribed in terms of applications. So that's the this disability program that we run. We also run programs, as I say, around prison entrepreneurship for inner city youth, for refugees and asylum seekers. At the beginning of this year, we've created a new research center, which is the Center for Entrepreneurial Behavior, Inclusion and Innovation. So as to give, we want to research these communities much more thoroughly and provide evidence-based approaches to inclusive entrepreneurship. Why does it matter? Why does inclusion matter? Well, what we're hoping to achieve through our work is to help build economic independence amongst these communities. We're also, as was evident in the disability program, as I just talked about, personal growth and that notion of transforming one's life is hugely important. I've been telling the story quite a few times this year, but back in January when we were having the last Dragon's Den event, one of the participants was, pitching to the dragons, and at the end of it said, before this course started, I was in a very dark place, and this course changed my life. And I went, wow, I had no idea that the course was having such an impact. And that's the kind of change that, we're helping to make. But also we're valuing, the participants as entrepreneurs, just as entrepreneurs. And the way that they're driving innovation, the way that they're, working towards satisfying gaps in the market through their own lived experience, through their own sense of diversity. It's also, why it matters is because it creates jobs, not just for the people who are starting the business, but some of these businesses are now employing people. It also building resilience, and advocacy within the community itself. And obviously, as I've said many times, it demonstrates the value of universal design, not only in society, but like in business also. And I keep saying this, but universal design has got to be part of everything that you're doing. So my final slide is, how do we create an enabling ecosystem? And I'm looking to the university to think about this. Well, first of all, you've got to embed disability into the strategy. It's got to be just part of what you do. Now, unfortunately, at government level, in national entrepreneurship strategies and policies, that's not happening. And that's why I think universities might take the lead. At the moment, at best, it's an afterthought when instead it should be embedded. We should ensure that all training and funding programs are universally accessible, right? And that's not just in terms of where it's held, but it's in everything that's been done. We need to collect more data, okay, so that I think what you measure gets changed, type of thing. And I think the more we know, the better we can perform. We need to expand inclusive finance. We need to find ways of making funding more accessible, particularly for people who have limited capital savings to start with. And I think microfinance would be the most likely tool to help in that situation. We need to foster collaboration, okay, between, this is back to the quadruple helix, right, where it's not just government, academia, and industry, but it's also the community itself. And it's got to be co-created. It can't be the university coming up with a program and sending it out there. It's got to be co-created with the partners. And we've got to recognize that persons with disabilities as agents of innovation, right, not objects of policy. Actually, I was making the point just last week at a conference that good policy is human policy. And if we're truly inclusive, then we've got to recognize not only the voice of persons with disability, but the equal contribution that they're making in the development of all of this. And, as I finished, there is nothing about us without us must be more than just a slogan. It must be really what we're about. So that's my presentation. And I hope that across all of that there were some nuggets that were of interest or of value to you. But what I'd like to, I suppose, reinforce is that first of all, I'm happy to share my slides. I'm happy to send those on and have those shared. So if anybody wants to go back to them, I'm happy for them to be shared. And secondly, the resources that we've developed, I'm happy to share those also if you wanted to consider developing a program locally. And I'm happy to be available to provide feedback, thoughts, any advice, if that was something that was of interest to you. But most importantly, this is about the community. This is about a group of people who've got huge potential and that currently are being denied that potential, or there's barriers being put before them to maximize that potential. And we tend to see people with disabilities as a cost, not as a part of our community, an equal part of our community, and the contribution that can be made by that community for all of us, that benefits all of us, right? So I would encourage anyone on this call to please think about how you might help people with disabilities in terms of maximizing their economic and social potential. And if you do decide to be supportive and entrepreneurship is the route you want to take, I'm quite happy to be available to be of assistance to you. So thank you again for the invitation. And Dean, thank you for being with us tonight. I appreciate you taking time to be with us. Yeah, thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Tom. Thank you indeed for your very excellent lecture. And if one of our colleagues here has any question for Tom, go ahead, please. In fact, I have a couple of questions, Tom, because
Sure.
the lecture you give, it provides us with a lot of dimensions, in fact, a lot of windows to think about how to incorporate people with disabilities in the entrepreneurial process. Because, we think of even the visual idea of entrepreneurs, people who are very active, very smart, you know, and people who usually have ideas, brilliant ideas. And I have a number of questions related. One of them, you mentioned that in case of Liam's case, he has one of the difficulty in finding the money. Do you know any kind of venture capitalist or kind of financiers who are specialized in people with disabilities?
Yes, there's an agency in the UK called Kaleidoscope Investments,
Yeah.
and Kaleidoscope Investments only invests in companies that are founded by someone with a disability only. And then if they invest in your company, they also build in mentoring support with it.
Excellent.
So there is, but the problem with it is that it's so rare. Like there's none in Ireland. There's, you know, yeah. And so what happens actually is that it's like microfinance agencies tend to be the fallback. You know, the credit unions, or you know, that kind of facility, because a lot of investors won't, you know, aren't interested. And even though, you know, like I had a course participant back in 2021 actually on the first program, and she developed an app that was quite innovative, and she got 100,000 euro seed funding from TU Dublin actually, but then couldn't get further funding. And she was told, if you get somebody, you know, to work with you, okay, who's not disabled, we'd be interested. Right? So it wasn't, the rejection wasn't based on the idea or its capability, right? It was based on the fact that, you know, you've got a disability, so therefore, you know, we presume you're not capable of running a business, right? So that's part, like, as I said earlier, there's multiple challenges. There's also the fact that they don't have money to put into the business, right? And actually, what I didn't say is, because of the poor rates of employment, and also because there's poor rates of pay, and also they're less likely to be in managerial positions. So therefore, you're not developing any of the skills that would help you to start up your own business. So there's just so much going against you. And then, as I say, the financiers are looking at this and going, don't have any managerial experience, don't have any money of your own, okay, don't have anybody working with you, you know, don't want you. And that's why, as I say, it kind of goes back to microfinance, credit unions as your best option. Can I also say that there are lots of success stories, right? That, and we profile those also. And what's really interesting is that on our program, the variety of the nature of disabilities has been extraordinary, but also the variety of the business ideas. So it's not like people are coming up with business ideas that are targeting the disability community. They're coming up with ideas that are of all types, right? And one of the more successful programs, our participants started up a TV and film production content company, and is already after winning international awards and is employing people. So, you know, it's that's the exciting bit. It's really, really varied.
Okay. In terms of the university incubators, do you know, I think what you did at TU Dublin, it's a kind of the university incubator that is directed for people with disabilities, right?
No, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, the incubator that we have is a general incubator that would be standard in any university.
Okay.
We run the program. So I'm in the faculty of business, And we run the program for people with disability. And then from it, if there's anything of interest that would be of value, or where the incubation center could take it to the next level, right? Then, you know, we work with the incubation center in terms of moving it on. But that only depends then as well as that if they're Dublin based, because the people are from all over the country, so they may be living, you know, 200 miles away, and they go, I don't want to be in an incubation center in Dublin. I want to be somewhere local. So then we try and hook them up with, you know, local support agencies. So no, just it's important we clarify that it's a general incubation center, but they are supportive of what we do.
Okay, excellent. And for the case of the, you mentioned that you managed to have bank funding for 3 years, I think. And
Yes.
what it was the like a soft loan offered by the banks, or what kind of funding?
No, so they've given us a substantial 6-figure sum to the university to pay for the university's costs of running the program. So all the students are registered as students, so their student fees are paid by the bank. The costs of the teachers, the kind of the person that's delivering the program, okay, is contracted from outside. That comes out of that budget. The promotional activity comes out of that budget. So all of the cost things come out of that budget that the bank has paid for, you know, through their support. And obviously we call it's AIB Bank, and so we call it the AIB program for, you know.
So it's sponsored by the bank.
Yes.
And you mentioned that you have 3 success stories, I think, right? 3 projects come out
per year.
Yeah. And it started in the program. How many projects do you have managed successful projects come out of this initiative?
So our estimation, and we need to do some research on this, and unfortunately I don't have the resources at the minute, but our current estimation is that there's 16 startups in 14 startups because this is our 5th year. So there was 2 years with 3 startups, and there was 2 years with 4 startups. And to our knowledge, each of those are still in existence. Now, what we don't know is what businesses have been started up by people after they left the program, but maybe it was like maybe a year later or 6 months later, or because all we were doing was measuring it in the, you know, when the program finished. We didn't measure it. We haven't been back to them frequently enough. We just know through conversation that the 14 people, we know these companies have started up, and we know it's through conversation we believe that they're still in existence.
Excellent. And you mentioned something that about another countries are interested or are applying this program, right?
Yeah.
Maybe we can talk about it later, how we can have this experience that you have in TU Dublin implemented in our university.
For sure.
Yeah, because it is very important topic, and even we can have with us other stakeholders here in Palestine.
See, what I'm saying, right, what I've argued is that I'm not suggesting that entrepreneurship or self-employment is going to solve all the problems, you know, employment problems but self-employment has got to be part of the conversation. It's got to be an option that's available. And with assistive technologies, with remote working, with the way the world has changed, with apps and websites and all the rest of it, this, working from home and creating your own business while having a disability is now much more possible than ever before. So let's include it in the conversation. Let's have it as an option for the community. And it's not going to solve all the problems, but it can certainly, it can certainly offer some people the option of a career choice that currently is not available to them.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Okay, colleagues, if any question to Professor Tom?
Hi, thank you, Professor Tom. I'm Rafa. I want to thank you for this presentation. I think which sheds light on the importance of entrepreneurship. If we remember yesterday, the Nobel Prize was given for the 3 economists who are working on innovation and economic growth. So it means the entrepreneurship, something important in our life, like what you said about the disabilities. And I think if we manage to apply this program in Palestine, especially I think the number of disability in Palestine is higher as a result of the war and genocidal war in Gaza. So I think it will be good option for us in Palestine, but it needs the cooperation, university, as you said, government, community, industry, to manage to do this program.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that there's probably great need for it. And also it will take different partners coming together to make it happen. The university alone, even though it's quite willing and maybe can work quite hard, it needs money, it needs partners, it needs other people involved. It needs disability advocacy organizations, involved as well. So Rafa, yeah, I completely agree with you, that it's both an opportunity here, but also it's challenging in terms of bringing all that together and making it happen. And that's why I'm happy to offer advice if needed.
Thank you very much, Professor Khalid. Well appreciated. Any question, colleagues? I think we are running out of questions. On behalf of the Faculty of Business and Communication, I would like to thank you very much, Professor Tom Cooney, for this very interesting lecture you gave us today. And I hope this will be not the last. It is the first, but not the last time you will be with us. And as I mentioned, there will be more and more coming, inshallah, with respect to this very interesting topic. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and I'll send the presentation to Shaha, and so that I'm quite happy for it to be shared, and we can meet, you and I, on another occasion, and we can have a conversation. I'd be quite happy to do that. And thank you again for the invitation. It was a pleasure to be with you tonight.
Thank you very much. Have a nice evening.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.